Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslock talking about Reciprocity.com, the sharing economy proofreading platform that I am trying to build. And in this video, what I'm going to do is actually talk about figuring out your company culture. But instead of thinking about your company culture, I want you to think about the corporate identity or the company identity. So this is where I'm going to get into what exactly I mean by the company identity and then how you can actually build it. And then, some of the issues and stuff like that that you would actually see when you're talking about or building your corporate identity or company identity. So this is actually all about it. This is a video series I put out every Saturday, and I call it Small Business and Startup Saturdays. It is all about these issues of taking your company from a small, tiny entity, a one-person entity, and building into something a little bit bigger. Perhaps it is, a 50-person company to maybe even a 10,000 person company or even larger, right? So something that's really big. So I'm trying to give this out. And I wanted to point out, so I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship at a large state institution in Florida, and I'm just providing this advice just to make sure that a lot of people know how to do this. I wanted to make it sure that it was very scalable, that I could give this advice, and this is a great platform to put it on YouTube videos. So here it goes. So what do I mean by the company culture? Well, the company culture is generally focused on just how the internal members of the company feel and deal with the organization. So I want you to actually focus a little bit broader. And some people might think about the corporate brand or the company brand. And some people might perceive this as, what are the external people viewing the particular company as and how it actually operates in the real world. I want to even think even more broader, right? I want you to think about how do various stakeholders, both internally in the organization as well as externally of the organization, how do they understand and come to identify the identity of that particular organization? This is really important. So it's not just about the corporate brand. It is not just about the corporate culture, but it is how people feel and perceive that particular company exists and how it works, right? So with one individual, right? If you're a startup, you're a small business, one individual, yes, it's really easy to identify with that particular identity. It's usually the one particular individual. If they're a really nice, if they're a nice businesswoman, for example, then people really like dealing with that particular person, right? So it's not just at that moment, the identity is really tied in with the particular individual. So we might think that, they're very, very nice to deal with. So actually, you can actually separate those things apart. So as it grows, maybe you want niceness as one of the features of the identity of the particular organization. So you want to select for people that are nice, and it's not just that one particular individual, right? So you can tease those things apart as you move from a small company to a very, very large company. And what's really important is not necessarily, what are the internal people sort of identifying with and making sense of with a particular company culture, but it's also what are the external people to the stakeholders. So these might be things like maybe it's the people you deal with at the bank on a regular on a regular basis. Maybe it's your customers, for example. Maybe it is people that you deal with as vendors, right? So these are all the different sort of stakeholders, external stakeholders. These all really matter, and they have to have a perception of how your company operates. It's not just the product brand, it's not the corporate brand, but it's thinking about how that company operates and what they represent. And there's a lot of different examples and a lot of sort of ways that we sort of perceive this, right? So if we think of McDonald's, for example, we think of them as producing very, cheap, inexpensive, but delicious food that lots of people can enjoy, and it's sort of enjoyable across a lot of different, people, right? And so their brand is actually family, or thinking about family. And so they've worked in all these different things. It's not particularly just the brand, but we have to think about, well, what does it represent? It's all the mechanization that goes on behind the scenes. It's how they deal with the external stakeholders and all those things that sort of fit in together, how we come to identify that that company does exist and how it operates. And so what that ends up doing is that becomes the basis for the company culture, right? That becomes, well, the people that you hire will select into that company over time because they understand what that company is about. They understand what the particular identity of that particular company is about. And then that's going to build the culture. And as well as the people that, say, your vendors, right? Your suppliers that you have, you want to really think about the suppliers and how they identify with your particular firm, because they will deal with certain firms and not others. They have a choice, right? A lot of times vendors have a choice that they can go and deal with different companies. And if you have a particular identity that is really, really ruthless, and there's a lot of different companies out there that drive down the cost of the vendors and the suppliers, and they just don't want to deal with those particular people or those particular companies. So they end up choosing not to go and dealing with them, and they sort of supply other different companies, right? So this kind of builds and creates this sort of interlocking perception of how the company actually works and operates. So it's very much this feeling of how the company operates, both externally and internally. So people will, within the company, they will start to sort of deal with their issues and problems with each and every other person within the company based on how they perceive that we should interact within the company, right? So that is kind of getting into the culture sort of area where you have this particular culture, and we understand, those members understand how you should interact and treat each other and deal with conflict and deal with, all these sort of sensitive issues. Maybe it's pay equity and all that kind of stuff. That is really important. And that's how we come to understand, how people become to understand a particular company, how it exists and how it operates, right? So that's why it is so important. As it grows, it becomes even more increasingly important to think about the identity, not just the company culture, but the identity of the company, where when you have one person, it is really easy to control the identity. You just control yourself, right? But as it grows, you as that individual one person, say you have 10 members on your team, you have less control out of how other people are interacting and making sense of what's going on. So you have to really you have to really think about how that company actually operates and how those individuals operate and what is the identity of the company. And if it gets to 10,000 employees, like just really big, right? 10,000 employees, that the identity becomes so important, because the individual leadership, they do matter a little bit, but they don't matter nearly as much as when it was just a single person company, right? So the 10,000 person company, it's kind of operating on its own, and it needs an identity, both for that the external stakeholders can understand what it's about, and then they will choose to deal with that particular company. So they will self-select. They'll say, oh, this company does this kind of stuff. I'm going to go check out to see what they're doing and deal with them. Or they have a history of being very, very sort of nice, or they have a history of being really ruthless, or they have a history of having the top performers in all the entire industry, right? All of the best employees go to this particular company. I'm going to go deal with them. It's going to be a lot more expensive, but I'm going to go deal with them because I know it's going to get done. And so how all these things kind of interact and they all make sense of each other, that is really important. And as it grows, it becomes increasingly more important because that one individual has less and less sort of stake in what actually operates or what happens in the company. So it's important to think about the people you bring on board early on, because that's going to build the identity of the company. If you bring on people that are going to be nasty and deal with, be sort of, headbutts and doing all that kind of crazy stuff with other people, you probably are going to create an identity of the company that is really ruthless, right? Or if you start doing things like pay for performance early on, you might create a culture that is very, very competitive and very ruthless at the beginning. So you have to be very careful of how you choose your pay structure. So you might want to maybe divvy out a little bit of sort of merit pay and a lot of, maybe it's just salary or something like that, and sort of divvy it out depending on what kind of culture you want. And that all really makes an important difference on the identity of the company, how external people and internal people are perceiving how that company operates, right? So you have to be very, very careful. The first thing that you should do if you want to build the identity of the company and think about the identity of the company is that you should probably go and sort of interview both people within the company, how they perceive the company and how it operates, get a real sense of what they are doing if you want to build this identity and how they perceive what's going on. So if it's you, it's easy, right? You know what it's going to be. But say if it's 10, 50 people, you should probably get a sense of how they perceive what is going on in the company. Then you should also, so here's the thing this is why it's different than the culture, and most people will stop at that. You should go ask the various stakeholders that you deal with, not just your customers, but as well as maybe it's your bankers, maybe it's your vendors, maybe it's all these different sort of stakeholders. Get a feel for how they are perceiving the company at this moment. And if there's kind of things you don't like or you want to change, well, that is a clear moment where you can sort of create or imagine an identity that can change, right? As you grow, you can change this. And then you sort of write it out and you make sense of it, have a really short statement of what you want the company to represent and what it to feel and what is the company, and you keep working at that and building it. And here's the thing, it's going to be really slow to change it, right? So that identity early on, it's really easy. If it's 1, 2, 5 people, it's really easy to change that identity because you just bring on different people on board or you get rid of other people, right? So it's just really easy to change that. And then you just tell people, well, this is what we want to represent. But when it's 50 people, when it's 100 people, you have to identify what that identity is and just reiterate it and reiterate it and reiterate it until people start self-selecting and start realizing what this company is about. Both internally, they will start self-selecting. They'll start bringing on people that they really like, or it sort of matches that identity, for example. And as well as externally, other people, other sort of buyers and suppliers and all that kind of stuff, all those people will start to deal with you in a different way because they understand what that company is about. And then that's going to help you grow as a company because you have less sort of control of what's going on, and people are going to understand what it's about, and you're going to fit better within the sort of niche of the marketplace. And then people are going to understand what it's about. So that's really, really important. I wanted to talk about that because I think it's essential to growing a company from something that's small to something that is, substantial. And as it grows, you want to keep thinking about not just the corporate brand, not just the product brand that you have, not just the culture of the particular company, but as well as the identity, how it all sort of fits together and we make sense of that. So if you like this video, make sure you do the old pew. You could also do a as well. That's fine. You could add comments and all that kind of stuff. You can also watch older videos if you like any of these kind of videos. It helps out with the search engine stuff, so more people get to see these videos. The other thing that you can do is go onto the Reciprocity website. The E is spelled with a 3. You can go on there and check out to see what I'm doing. I'm trying to build out a sharing economy proofreading platform where more people can interact. They can either earn credits, just kind of like how you think of ride sharing, for example, or you can eventually cash those credits out and make money from it, or you can pay for credits and stuff like that if you need proofreading done, very quickly. So that's it. That's all I wanted to talk about. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to this video. Take care and have a good day. Bye.